Now that we have the ability to create or connect to an existing instance, let's also add the functionality of creating a new model in any instance we're connected to. Let's do our usual by adding a button. We'll add a macro called createNewModel and change the text on our button accordingly. First thing we'll do now is to declare a return variable ret as a long integer. Return variables are widely used in programming for outputting the execution result of a function. This is a programming convention that's been popular since the introduction of the C language, in which there are no procedures, only functions that return values. It's common practice that functions return a value of 0 if they were successful in their execution, with values different from 0 considered execution errors. Sometimes these values can indicate different types of errors depending on their numeric value. We'll be using this a lot since return variables are quite common in SAP 2000 API functions, although it is not common that they have specific error codes. Now, we'll define an object variable for our SAP 2000 model as a CSAP model type, and we'll set it as a property of our SAP 2000 object. Let's also add a check before all this to see if our SAP 2000 object has been assigned. If it has not been assigned, then we'll add an exit statement. The exit statement can make the code exit an encapsulating environment. For example, a for cycle. In this case, we'll write exit sub. So, what we're saying here is that if our SAP 2000 object is not assigned, we'll send out an error message and then exit the sub environment, which is the current macro procedure we're in. And let's also do the same for our SAP 2000 model. Since these are considered critical errors, it's better to exit the procedure rather than risk continuing its execution. By the way, if you're wondering why we can access the model object, even though we haven't told SAP 2000 to initialize it previously, it's because SAP 2000 automatically creates an empty model when it initializes a new instance. Next, we'll use our SAP 2000 model variable, and we'll call its InitializeNewModel function. Then, we'll open brackets, and we can see it's expecting a value from the same enumeration that we used in our first example that details the units with which we want to initialize the new model. We'll put kilonewtons, meters, and Celsius as we did previously. And we'll also use our return variable to get the result of this action. We're not expecting errors when executing this code, but it's a good practice for code debugging. We won't be verifying most of the return variables automatically since that would make our code much longer, but it's very helpful when looking for where our code went wrong. Frequently, when debugging, it saves us a lot of time by looking for a non-null return value, rather than analyzing in depth what every single input and output is. Finally, we'll then check the return value and issue some messages depending on its value. Alright, now, let's check to see if our code works. Let's click the button first. Obviously, we'll get an error message because we haven't launched a new SAP 2000 instance, so let's do that manually. Now, since we moved our SAP 2000 object variable to the module header, that means the SAP 2000 object variable can be set by either the macro that launches a new instance or the one that connects to an existing instance. So now we should be okay with calling our model creating macro directly without having to connect to the SAP 2000 instance. Let's try again. Success! We've created a new model. But since it was already empty, how do we know that it really did anything? We could try two things. First, let's change the units on our SAP 2000 instance. Now let's click the button. And, as you can see, the model units have changed. We can also create a new model from SAP 2000 and see if our action overwrites the current model. So, our action was successful, and the existing model was overwritten as expected.